Hi, everybody. Again, Dr. Lisa McCall, Assistant Superintendent in Tigard-Tualatin School District in Oregon, suburb of Portland, and a little south of Portland with about a little bit over 11,000 students. And so a little bit about me and my journey to where I am today is I have a picture of a special, someone special in my life. And her name is Betty Davis, no relationship to the actress Betty Davis. But Mrs. Davis, I grew up, I'm a native Texan, by the way. If you spend time with me, you'll hear the southern accent come out here and now, even though I'm a transplant to the Northwest. But Mrs. Davis lived in our community in a small town outside of Dallas with about 350, population of 350. And Mrs. Davis, along with her husband and another friend, they were the only teachers of the only black school in this small town. And I took this picture with her last year when I visited this town. Mrs. Davis, she is 95 years old, and this was taken last year. She looks good. But the thing about Mrs. Davis is that during desegregation, when they integrated from the black students to the local school, neighboring school, Mrs. Davis, her husband, and the other black teacher were the only ones that went to the other school. And so I share this picture because all of my life I always wanted to have a teacher that looked like me. And so for a brief period, Mrs. Davis was that teacher, a fourth grade teacher. She started teaching first grade. I am a former first grade teacher as well, and I didn't know until later how inspirational this woman would be to break the code of going to an all-white school and being the one of only 2 teachers of color at that school. Little did I know that it had an impact on me, because throughout my career, I would be one of an only person of color, only teacher of color in my school. Then the first black female assistant superintendent of my district. And thank you, Jess. And also in the state of Oregon, up until this year, we only had no more than 5 black assistant superintendents in the state of Oregon. And so, again, this quote, if I can get someone to read the quote on the screen, if you don't mind. Who would like to read the quote? Yolanda.
The choices we make in leadership today will leave a lasting imprint on our students' futures with impacts that will resonate for generations.
Thank you, Yolanda. And I wrote this quote because I was thinking about my journey and the impact that as I stand here, and I'm a proud woman, in a couple of months I will be 61 years old. Yes. And, you know, the future that I leave is not just for the students in my district, but it's for the next slide. It is also for my grandchildren. So I'm a proud grandmother of 8. This is only 5 of them. 8 grandchildren, ranging from the age of 9 to 6 months. And so it really resonates with me, my purpose and my why. And I got into education for my kids, and now my grandchildren, these 5, are in schools. And I truly believe, and what I've learned and still believe, is that our current educational system by design is not meeting the needs of all of our students. Now, when Mrs. Davis and her husband went to the school and during desegregation, nothing was changed for the students who had to be bused in. It was students who looked like me who had to do the changing to the environment. And just like Magna was talking about math identity and asking the questions of us, what was your anxiety around math? Mine was that I was invisible. I was a good math student, but I still felt invisible. So I say that, and I wrote that quote because it keeps me grounded as to I want not just students who are, I believe the system was designed to educate, but I want students like my grandchildren to get a world-class education in reading. And we're going to talk a little bit about my journey in partnership with Ignite and how no longer could I look at the data and say, okay, here's just another year that is predictable, but that students are not making progress in reading. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you so much to the Power Trip team. This is also my first time, and I am so grateful to be here. This is above and beyond the best conference I've ever been to, and I am now ruined anytime I go to any other conference. So thanks, Marilyn. I'm Jess. I think I've met all of you in here. I am co-founder and CEO of Ignite Reading. And just like Dr. McCall shared her story and her why, I wanted to share a little bit about my story and my why. I come into this work as an educator, also first grade teacher. Was anyone else in this room a first grade teacher? Yes, love it. Taught fourth grade and fifth grade, was an instructional coach, was a school leader, was a literacy specialist for a network of schools in New York City. So I have lived some lives in education, and with that comes a deep understanding and what I call authoritative empathy around best practices in teaching and learning. I am also a mom. That is my daughter, Penelope, and one of my favorite children's books, The Hug Machine. And I think it was Brittany, when she was speaking, talked about how becoming a parent really changes you. And I definitely found that becoming a mom made me an even better educator because it cultivated an empathy around what it means to be a parent and what it means to send your most precious thing in the whole wide world to school each day and to trust that they are going to get an excellent education. And the reality that for so many of our babies in this country, that is not happening. And that's just not okay. And then on top of all of that, I am, I'm also a cancer survivor. It'll be 10 years in March, which I am so shocked by. I didn't imagine that I would live long enough to see my daughter go to kindergarten, let alone join me for Era's tour last week. So I am not just alive, but between Era's and being here, I am officially living my best life. And when you go through an experience like that, which I still have lots of trauma that I continue to process around that experience, but it changes you. And in my case, I was already a very intense person, and going through cancer actually made me even more intense because it just amplified my passion for serving children and my sense of purpose. So I run a company called Ignite Reading, And I am really, really grateful. The word that I wrote when we first showed up was alive. And I am really grateful to be alive, given what I've gone through. And also to get to wake up every day, which is a gift in and of itself, but then to spend all day, every day, obsessing over how to teach as many kids in our country as possible how to read as quickly as possible, because our kids can't wait. And if there is nothing else we do in education, if we were to only teach them to read, they would have an entire world unlocked for them. And when we think about mathematics and any other content area, being able to read is fundamental to them being able to access all of that knowledge. And so it is with that passion, as well as the lived experience as an educator in many different roles, that I built Ignite Reading. And what we do is we provide one-to-one foundational reading skills instruction from expertly trained reading tutors who are precisely targeting each child's gaps on the continuum of learning to read. Underpinning everything we're doing is a evidence-based curriculum written by reading researchers. It is a curriculum that school systems across the country also use. And the most important thing about what we're doing, because kids do not have time to waste, is we underpin everything with data. We do baseline diagnostics up front to understand exactly why a child can't yet read. We start teaching into those gaps. We routinely progress monitor them, and then we wrap around everything with dibbles to validate that what we are doing really is working, and it's working fast. So our expert reading tutors are largely non-educators. We have some retired teachers in our core, but it's a lot of college kids or gig economy workers, senior citizens. They go through over 100 hours of paid professional learning, plus practicum experience, in order to learn how to teach reading. So I don't know about you, but the amount of time I had learning how to teach kids to read before I stepped into a classroom in the Bronx was 0 hours. I went 2 full years of being a classroom teacher, serving a population of kids who were vulnerable and marginalized and amazing, and I could not teach them to read, even though they still, in 5th grade, did not know how to read, and that is so messed up. But with what we're doing, I like to think of ourselves as like an on-ramp to ignite a future core of educators, such that if they were to step into a classroom, they already know how to assess and differentiate instruction and teach kids to read to the point of fluency and automaticity. So that's the quality of the human that is meeting with students each day in Ignite Reading.
Thanks, Jess. So as a former 1st grade teacher, one of the things, my joy was seeing kids learn how to read. I love that about a 1st grade. And we know that in 1st grade, in kindergarten, you're teaching those foundational reading skills. And so as an assistant superintendent, I also supervise principals. And we had 10 schools. And one of the questions that I would ask each and every one of the principals, because again, we know our data is disproportionate for students of color, for multilingual learners, for students with disabilities. But one of the questions I would ask each and every one of my principals, if my grandchildren were in your school, would they be succeeding? And I pose that question because what the data shows is that students of color, again, the disproportionate outcomes, it's predictable by race, by gender. And our district was no different. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing that I noticed in our data over those 10 schools is that something was happening in 2nd grade. What we would see year after year is that by kindergarten, students come in, they're ready to learn. And then they're still a little bit on par in 1st grade. But then there was this big dip in outcomes and student progress in second grade. Not at just one of my schools, but at every one of the 10 schools. And bringing those principals together said, we need to do something different. Like Jess said, it's urgent. And you only get one opportunity for each year that a student. So if they're not getting about first, second grade, and they're not reading by third grade, we have a problem. And so I got introduced to Ignite because we were looking at what is the root cause of a problem. Because so many times we implement initiatives and we just keep going and implement it, and we don't stop to say, are we really addressing, are we making a difference in this implementation? So my idea was to start with the pilot of just one school, 20 students. And so we did a pilot for 20 students at one school. I picked a Title I school, very diverse, and then we added 2 more schools in 2023. And then this fall, all 10, a total of 250 students having an opportunity to get this tiered intervention.
So when we partner with schools, it's coming in and recognizing that in order to implement this thing called the science of reading, which everybody is talking about, it goes above and beyond just adopting high-quality instructional materials, which is massively important, but in and of itself is not enough because of the implementation gap. So you can have, even in the most perfect literacy ecosystem, gorgeous whole class tier 1 instruction happening. You could then have a subset of kids who still need more, who are getting small group intervention, and then an even smaller group of kids in tier 3 who are getting additional support. And it still won't be enough, because even within small groups, even within tier 3, assuming you can even consistently provide tier 3, assuming you even have identified the right kids for tier 3, right? We know all of the ways that all of this can go off the rails, but you will still have kids falling through the crack. And so what has to be in place in any literacy ecosystem is a foundational skills safety net, because learning to crack the code is crucial. When we look at high-stakes test scores in 3rd grade and kids aren't passing those tests, when you dig a layer deeper, or even you look at our 4th grade NAEP data, right, it's because underpinning that is disfluency. If kids can't fluently read text, their brains aren't freed up to do the beautiful work of comprehension. And then when you look at disfluency, what you find are decoding gaps. And so this concept of a foundational skills safety net that catches those kids who would be otherwise falling through the cracks because they need more in order to learn to read, or they need that one-on-one attention so that they're not opting out when in a small group setting. That is where high-quality, high-dosage tutoring comes in and can be massively beneficial for moving the needle north for all kids.
And so what we noticed in our first year with, well, even this year with all of the students, we had a high attendance rate. And if you see the chart here, it shows that most of our students who participated in this intervention were in 2nd grade because, again, there was something that was happening mainly around decoding, and it was a systemic problem. And so 83% of our students, again, according to Ignite, that's a high percentage rate of students attending in our 10 schools. And what I want to say about this is that in my role, I also visit schools. I love being in the classroom, and so I had an opportunity more than once to visit each of the programs, and I saw 100% engagement. And that was the entire time. And we'll talk about this, but what I noticed too is the connections with the students, because that's a live person that they are engaged with by name. They know the students by name. And so all 215, probably 220, because Jess will tell you, that when you buy it, it's not per student, it's per seat. And so the beauty of this is that when Ignite partners tutors with students, they're intentional. So students are, maybe for the first time, is having another instructor that maybe looks and sounds like them. And that is a big thing, that's a big connection that, you know, in Tigard-Tualatin in Oregon, the majority of our teachers are white. All of my principals are white. And yet, I think Brittany, you were sharing the data with the highest population of subgroups is our Latina and Hispanic group. And so, and these schools are increasingly becoming more diverse, but yet our teaching force is relatively still the same. But the connections, so it's not just about the curriculum, but it's the connections that each and every one of these students were making every single day for 15 minutes, 5 days a week, and that was powerful. And so powerful that one day I was visiting one of my schools, and as I was going into the building, this student was coming out, and he stopped me and he said, "Are you my tutor?" I'm like, Well, I'm like, well, no, I'm not your tutor. I'm Dr. McCall. You know, you see me around probably. And, you know, it didn't dawn on me until I went in and I sat down with the principal and I said, just met one of your students, and it was kind of odd because he was asking me if I was his tutor. And she said, because you look like his tutor. And again, imagine this student, and a lot of our students are students of color, not being able to see anybody else that look like them. But for this student, in addition to the support he's given by his classroom teachers, this was another person that looked like him.
So when we first start, we do baseline diagnostics, and what we saw in serving kindergarten through 5th grade students is that the majority of kids had decoding gaps that placed them at kindergarten and 1st grade levels. So, you know, Dr. McCall talks about there was this thing going on in 2nd grade. What was going on in 2nd grade? Well, right here's what's going on in 2nd grade. All but 5 of your participating kids in the program are still working on kindergarten and 1st grade level skills, even though the bar has shifted, and now in 2nd grade they're expected to read multisyllabic words and text fluently. So this information is what allows us to figure out where we need to precisely begin instruction. This right here is the continuum of foundational skills that we teach in our curriculum. And here's the thing. I remember once upon a time when I was interviewing to be a K-12 instructional coach, and somebody said to me, how can you coach high school when you've only ever been an elementary and middle school teacher and or administrator? And I said, well, part of this is that I just believe I can do anything I put my mind to, but the other part of it is that good teaching is good teaching is good teaching, period, amen. So lots of people will ask me, well, how does this curriculum that you're using integrate with whatever we might be doing in our literacy ecosystem? Well, the good news is, if you are using high-quality instructional materials, these are the skills used to teach kids to read. And maybe certain curricula teach them in a different order, but it's all the same shit that kids need to learn if they're going to learn to read with automaticity and fluency, right? So it's pretty agnostic, and it's one-on-one, which means they're getting an extra scoop of whatever they personally need. So if I'm a 1st grade teacher and my curriculum says today we're teaching R controlled vowels, but I have, you know, sweet Gianna in my class who is still working on basic alphabet knowledge, she's not accessing that tier 1 lesson anyway, right? She needs an extra scoop later in the day that's going to precisely target what her gaps are so that we can bring her up to speed as quickly as possible. So this really beautifully and coherently will integrate with any curriculum that teachers may already be using. We're figuring out where kids are on this continuum, beginning that instruction, progress monitoring them along the way, and then, this is the best part, there is so much data, and what we are trying to do is empower and build capacity. So we give every school partner and the district an Ignite Reading Literacy Specialist who meets monthly to unpack this data and talk about the instructional implications. So this in and of itself is really rich professional learning for teachers and school leaders, because as much as we might want to pretend like everyone running schools and teaching in classrooms has really truly embraced the science of reading and how the brain needs to be taught to read, the reality is that many of us are still very much in a change management game. And one of the best ways I have learned that you can change hearts and minds is to create an undeniable proof point that the problem is not the kids, right? The problem is access to the quality of instruction and the precision of instruction that they need and that they need right now. So what we saw with Tigard-Tualatin this past school year is that kids made reading gains fast. And Lisa's going to talk in just a moment about the iReady and the Dibbles data. But what you see here is those kindergarten gaps that we talked about on this slide, all of the purple hues, those kindergarten gaps decreased by 88%, such that we ended the school year with only 7 kids still working on kindergarten skills. And guess what? When we talk about dyslexia screeners, when we talk about referrals for special education, in a lot of systems, it could have looked like 60 kids needed special education. And what we were able to figure out is like, no, really, actually, we're really only talking about 7 kids who are really needing additional intervention and support above and beyond even what we are doing with this intervention. The first grade blocks are a little bit tricky because kids move out of kindergarten skills into first grade skills. There are a lot of first grade skills to cover, and then they start to move into second grade skills. But what you can see here with that movement from first grade into second grade skills, at the beginning, only 16 of the students were working on multisyllabic decoding, a second grade skill. And by the end of this past school year, we had 90 kids working on multisyllabic decoding. And Lisa will talk about what they saw when they started to do an RCT within the district and compared to iReady outcomes.
So this is just a list of our schools here in the district, and what you see is fall to spring data, and the dark blue is students who received Ignite intervention, and the light blue is a comparison of the students who did not. And that even though those students did not receive the intervention from Ignite, they still received intervention in the classroom. But as you can see, in every school, except for maybe one, the growth, according to what our iReady data showed for students.
And what's really great about this too is, you know, when we go back again to this slide, and I know this is highly nuanced, thanks for sticking with us here. When you're talking about second graders who are still working on kindergarten and first grade skills, yet held to a second grade benchmark, that benchmark is a lot different than the skills that they may still be working on. And so what's really incredible to see is over the course of a school year, as a result of the intervention, which is only 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, is that the kids were not only closing gaps, but then they were also showing that they were making it to benchmark based on iReady. So that's a phenomenal amount of growth when typically the status quo is that kids who have gaps, their gaps are not addressed, and those gaps just tend to widen.
And again, this is, the last slide was second grade, this slide is third grade, and again, showing the growth for those students who are 2 grade levels that we had most participation in was second and third grade. Again, one of the schools who is one of our most diverse schools, Mesker, which is a dual language school, showed the most growth out of all of our schools using Ignite intervention. And then, I want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, just a second.
What I wanted to, so Acadience is Dibbles really, and it, you know, tests fluency. And again, from fall to spring, you'll see, again, the students that didn't have Ignite as compared to our students who did, the amount of growth that they made. And the next slide, in my doctoral studies, I consider myself a practitioner researcher, And so if doing this pilot, I wanted to compare more scientific study. So what I asked my assessment coordinator to do was to find students with similar demographics to the students who were enrolled in, who were receiving the Ignite. That meant same students racially, linguistically, and on the same reading level to compare. And this is what we found, that students in these two schools, because this is the end of the second year that Durham and Deer Creek participated in the pilot, and what we found is that the students that was furthest from grade level made the most gains, and particularly what we call is our students who are undeserved, underserved students who are on the margin. That is, again, our students who our system was not necessarily designed for, because they made the most gain as compared to their peers who were almost at grade level, and that's powerful. Again, part of my researcher brain is anytime we do data that's quantitative, I also like to share a little bit of the quad data, meaning that voice data. What does our principal, our families, our teachers say about the program? And this is a little video that shares their perspective.
Why don't you play in the sand?
Reading was challenging for me at the beginning of the year, but now I feel like I've gotten way better.
When Robert was behind in his reading, it was very frustrating for him at home. It was quite a struggle to get through each word. Mrs. Brewer, the principal, told me about Ignite, and she said that they would spend one-on-one time just going over phonics and different activities to help catch him up.
The beauty of high-dosage tutoring is it's through an online platform. It's quick, it's 15 minutes. The same person with the same child every day, 5 days a week.
If he was ever sad.
When I met Yassine, he was reading really slowly, but then he's one of the students that really engaged with his tutor. Their tutor is like representing like different ethnicities. It really helps them connect, and he has gotten really comfortable, engaged in his learning, and has grown in his reading skills.
To move these non-readers into a zone where they are breaking the code of reading, I mean, it's exciting to see.
With what high-dosage tutoring has done at Durham Elementary, I can only imagine what outcomes could be across the state of Oregon for all of our children.
Wow. You know, I made this presentation with Lisa before I understood that, like, you know, we don't touch our phones here. So I added a QR code for anyone who wanted to scan it and request a meeting with me, but instead I'll just, you know, open invitation if you want to geek out and talk about teaching and learning and how to ensure that every one of your babies, once and for all, has the right to read, and honestly, has it before they end first grade. Because we talk a lot about reading by grade 3, and that is bullshit. Kids are supposed to learn to read by the end of first grade. Let's make that real for all of our kids so that they can have everything that education and life has available to them. We have like 3 minutes left. Sure. Great. Does anybody have any questions for Lisa or for me?
Are you doing this with Tier 2 students? How did you identify which students?
So we based it on, yes, to answer your question, Tier 2 and even some students that are Tier 3 and even some students that are beyond, say, 3rd grade. It was based on looking at the data and where they are and choosing the students who were not on grade level.
So did the Tier 2 and Tier 3 teachers just continue to do what they always did?
Mm-hmm. They did, yes.
And you did nothing to strengthen their lack of skills?
So they had an intervention. So we have a 90-minute plus. So those teachers that are they continue to provide their intervention, but also we engage with the teachers in letters training because, to be quite honestly, teachers need professional development in how to teach reading, and so that's what we did to engage them, and we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you're doing. I felt riveted by your presentation because it seems like you exist because of our failure to do our job for kids. And that's what I was thinking about the entire time you were presenting. And the 100 hours of training that you give to the people you employ, we don't do that with our teachers.
I know. I know. It is heart-wrenching, and as a teacher who myself never even got that training and couldn't serve my kids my first 2 years, the system has to change, but change is slow and kids can't wait. Right. And so what I wanted to build was something that honored that every teacher who goes into this profession does so because they want to serve kids. And it is really hard to want to stay a teacher when you feel unsuccessful. And we have the ability now, one of the silver linings of the pandemic was like, oh, there's something interesting about this concept of virtual. And so how do we bring someone whose only job is to specialize in being expert at teaching reading and bring them to each child one-on-one and have them give that child what they need, because teachers need that support too. I know that better than anyone because I was a teacher. And what it means for a teacher to feel like they then have, depending on the number of kids in their room who need the intervention, 20 other highly accountable humans coming in shoulder to shoulder to help them help their kids. I mean, Lisa will tell you, teachers at first are skeptical, understandably, as they should be. And then within like 2 weeks, they're like, how do I get more kids in this program? I need more of this. And we also honor that this data is powerful. It is not something we want to keep to ourselves or just say, oh, log into the portal and figure it out, right? We're going to come to you in a data meeting and do that cognitive lift for you, and then help you think about how to further leverage it to piggyback off of this intervention so that you're being more strategic about how you serve kids, which is what helps build capacity, because we can't do this by ourselves, just like teachers can't do it by themselves. We all have to work together in a really concerted way.
Thank you.
Thank you.